Good appropriate time of day.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the June 4th edition of the Gateway API Sync. Today, Mattia has volunteered to run the sync for us. Thank you, Mattia, and take it away.
I mean, great.
Yeah. Hello, everybody. Um, yeah, today is the usual SIG meeting for the Gateway API, and it is June 4th, 2024, 5 p.m., at least in Central Europe. And yeah, for the time being, if you want to write down your name and the list of attendees, just it would be great. And yeah, this meeting is regulated by the usual CNCF code of conduct. So please be nice to each other as usual. And I think we can start with the agenda that we have for today. I really hope I'm sharing only the tab I need to share.
Yeah, it looks
Thanks to
good.
that. Yeah. And yeah, first item is from Rob, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, I think anyone can go through this one. But yeah, I'll start. So we have decided, with our new release process that we'll have firm deadlines for every phase. And the first of those deadlines in the history of Gateway API is June 11, which is early next week. And that means that we are planning to complete scoping for the 1.2 release. So scoping really means two things. It means deciding which GEPs we think can graduate out of experimental into standard channel. And that's this discussion. And then there's a separate discussion that is which GEPs we want to introduce to the API as new experimental things. So this discussion that Mattia is looking at right now is very much focused on finding owners for these features and making sure that if there's a GEP that we think can graduate or should graduate in this release, we have somebody who can own that. So this is really just a call out if you think that you personally can own graduating a feature. It kind of shows what we think the work that's required is and is looking for volunteers to comment below. So far, I think only one. I mean, this is just from yesterday, so it hasn't been around that long. But Keith has volunteered for the last one in that list, which is great. But would love to get some other volunteers for some of the other ones. Maybe we can just work through each one in the list real quick. So if we go back to the top, the first one is timeouts and duration format. This is kind of a two-part one because they're two GEPs that are very tightly linked. I don't think we've done the work to ensure we have enough implementations for this one, but as long as we have enough implementations, I think this one becomes pretty straightforward. I don't know if Flynn or Frank or anyone who's worked on the earlier iteration of this has time to
I can
work
take the
on.
lead on that one.
Okay.
Yeah, there's things are a little bit strange for me right at the moment because there's about 14 different things all happening at the same time with work right now. But this particular one, both of these are well defined, really close to the finish line, and yeah, I can take those for sure. I don't think I'm going to be able to take anything new, which makes me sad because I was hoping to do that.
No worries. Well, great to have your help getting this one across. Do you mind leaving a comment there just to volunteer yourself? So I'm not volunteering
I
you.
can do that.
Thanks. Next one is Gateway class supported features. I don't think Lior is on today's call.
Yeah, I haven't seen him. Yeah, no, he's
Okay.
not here.
But last I checked with him, I think he is interested in taking this across the finish line as well. But certainly if anyone else is interested in helping, I'm sure he'd be more than welcome. The biggest question I think we need to answer on this one is if we are fine with the flat list that we have right now, or if we need some kind of structure to that list. Yeah.
We could
Uh,
presumably start with the flat list and then change it later if we needed to, right?
yeah,
I mean,
I think
that feels like
that's,
it doesn't really need to be a blocker.
yeah, I think that's probably how this will end up, and that seems okay-ish to me. Yeah. The next one is back TLS policy. Candace has done basically all of the work to get this one through. I think we're still waiting for a third implementation on this one. And we did make some, renames, significant renames in the last release, 1.1. Candace, what do you think about this get? Do you think we should try to push it forward in 1.2? I can't remember
Should.
if Candace.
Can you hear
Okay.
me?
Yep.
I do think that we should try to push it forward. Let's see, documentation mostly complete. Yeah, there's some more to do with conformance, and I'm supposed to be working on that. A lot of my day job has taken some of my time away from this.
Day jobs are so pesky, aren't they? I mean,
Exactly. So I would like this to go forward in 1.2, but I don't know exactly how to influence a third implementation. Just ask around, bribe
what
people. I
You
don't
could
know.
put in a fake report.
what are the existing two implementations?
I think it
Contour,
was, yeah, Contour and Envoy Gateway, right? Are those?
I believe
Contour,
so.
yeah.
We have it
Oh,
written.
Nginx. Oh, sweet. Maybe we
Contour and
are.
Nginx? Maybe we can. Oh wait, maybe we have three.
That
I
might be
think we
three.
might have. Yeah,
Okay, so
cool.
obviously the way you influence is just by asking the question of who the implementations are and then finding out there are three. So you're good to go.
Terrific.
Congrats.
Yeah, would like to
Okay.
push this forward.
All right. Great. Well, do you mind leaving a comment on that thread? Just and if you need help, maybe note that as well. Costin?
Yeah, Costin?
I've been wondering for a while, is a rule of three still the best option we had it when we started and there were probably 2 or 3 or 4 implementations only, but now we have quite a few implementations of the Gateway API, and having this kind of even optional APIs that have only 3 implementations it's quite confusing for users because it's, it's a very big burden to the user either to switch implementations or to know if in different cluster what implementation exists. Maybe having a majority of the implementation would be a better bar. I don't know. But as a user, I mean, at least when I tried recently to use different implementation of Gateway, and it's frustrating.
Yeah, no, so I completely get the pain point. I think it's one of the biggest challenges Gateway has going forward is trying to communicate that many features are not going to be supported by all implementations of the API, at least at the outset. And we need to do a lot of work to communicate that. That's what tools like Gateway Cuddle, what the supported features concept, all these things are working towards. Uh, what I've seen is that although we have a long list, dozens of implementations, there's a fairly short list of implementations that uh, stick to the latest set of features. I'm very grateful those exist, but they're, I would say maybe a handful, certainly less than 10 that are, regularly updating and on top of the latest releases. Um, It's always a balance between velocity and, broad support. But if we slow down too much, I think that we may end up in a situation where we end up with less overall adoption because we're missing some pretty stable table stakes features in this API, I would say.
But
Um,
for a pro user, is velocity good? I mean, it's something that users, I mean, yes, Contour and some other engineering gateway have this implementation. Does it help users too much, knowing that, if they are using, for example, Istio, knowing that they can migrate to Contour and get a set of features and lose some other features that they are using? You cannot even migrate from one implementation to another to take advantage because you may lose a feature that, yeah, it's basically you have a matrix of, different features, and you need to be very careful what you are actually using and go and, kind of, even picking an implementation is difficult with this model of, any tree implementing a feature and then another tree implementing another feature. Good luck finding an implementation that has the feature you need. I don't know. I mean, it's been frustrating for a while because it's, fragmentation, and it's going to create problem. I've seen this happening before in other cases. And I don't think velocity is impacted because Contour and the others can provide any features they want as vendor APIs or without creating this confusion for the user. So I don't know. It's probably something we need to consider and listen to user feedbacks or to find out, kind of do some examples of how you write a Helm chart using all those features that could work in any implementation, or having some tests that validate. I don't know how we can approach it, but it's very painful. It's writing a Helm chart that deploys and works, especially with security features involved. Not pretty.
Yeah, no, I completely get what you're saying. But Flynn and Mike have hands up, so maybe defer to them.
I think we're talking about two separate things here, at least two separate things here, actually. One of them is, do we believe that a given feature's API has been well enough defined that we can take the API to standard? And the other one is, do enough implementations support it that we should consider it a core feature as opposed to not? And Costin, I think you're mostly talking about the second of those two things, where the existing limit of 3 to me feels like it's really about the first of those two things. Taking a given API out of experimental before enough people have implemented it to know that we can work with it seems like a bad idea. But bringing the API to standard to say, hey, we think this API is good, that doesn't need to happen before everybody implements it. There are probably implementations that are not going to pick up a feature until it is standard, so they don't have to keep editing things. And at the point where we have lots and lots of implementations and almost everybody does it, then we can go, okay, this is a core feature. Everybody has to implement this now. But these are two really different things. And a lot of what you're saying about the difficulty of writing Helm charts and things like that mostly gets down to exactly what Rob said about how, yeah, we're missing table stakes features. We need to get those things in and start getting implementations to support them before we could even start having a meaningful discussion about the difficulty of moving between implementations and things like that.
For the record, I was not referring to core. I mean, core, it's even more complicated. I mean, having a core feature that is not implemented by all implementations would be a disaster, in my opinion. But because, again, we are kicking out implementations and users if we declare something as core. But it's okay. So let's take this example of this feature. Can people use it in Helm chart and can start adopting us as a user? Can users?
Yes, they can. They just can't
adopt it?
necessarily do it with a Helm chart that supports every implementation of Gateway API because, again, it's not a core feature yet.
Okay, I mean, we'll see how users reacted, but it's more fragmentation, and I don't think it's a huge burden.
We
to
are
require more
seeing how users react, and they are mostly reacting by not moving between implementations a lot. And they're complaining
Yeah.
because we can't do things like retries.
Yeah, I think
Well,
there are multiple very real risks here. One
Yeah.
of them is certainly that this will be very confusing to users. I definitely get that and am working. I think that the things we mentioned, also Christine's awesome work to try to illustrate this is really helpful, so you can make informed decisions about your implementation. But I think the other parallel risk is that there are table stakes features. Customers are saying we won't adopt X until you have Y. And
There are people who are not adopting Gateway API full stop because it can't do things that are critical for their applications. To me, that's the biggest risk that we have to deal with here.
Yeah. Mike, you
Kino,
had your hand.
Yeah, Mike.
Yeah, sorry, Mike, go
Yeah,
ahead.
no, it's fine. Basically, just reiterating a couple points of like, one, I think that yes, there is absolutely potential for us to build more and better tooling built on some of the building blocks that Rob was talking about, like the supported features API. And that's something that will let us have more confidence in being able to like look at an installed gateway class and say, does my existing configuration would it be able to be supported on this implementation, and do that programmatically? Like that's work that we're building the infrastructure to get towards now, which I'm really excited about. And then yeah, I think that there's very much a real like cohort of implementations that are not really interested in being at the bleeding edge of Gateway API and are really just waiting until things become standard before they actually implement them. So like for those implementations to proceed on any kind of like reasonable cadence, we really need that like small cohort that's doing the experimental work, the prototyping work to discover, does this experimental thing work? And getting the consensus from like those early implementations to discover like, hey, this thing has significant problems, we need to rework these bits, or hey, this is actually implementable across like a few diverse different implementations and proving it out, and then getting it in and moving that at a velocity that allows us to like actually make progress and move the standards so that these like trailing implementations are able to adopt the stuff at a reasonable pace. I think that one of the real risks that I want to avoid is slowing down the progression of the standard spec, because we've seen kind of what happens with the proliferation of vendor-specific APIs for things that either move very slowly or have a small core, like basically the Ingress API. Like I've seen similar issues in the MCS API over in SIG Multicluster, where you have vendors that are working the APIs and doing different things and diverging because the core has moved too slowly. And I think that's something that is like a real risk that I think that we have a good balance right now, and I would be more aligned with trying to keep that pace.
Yeah, I think this is a really good discussion. Thank you. And agree with all your points, Mike. I think maybe we should keep on moving because there is more to get to on the agenda, but I do definitely agree. These are some of the biggest risks our project faces, and I don't want to downplay them. I just, we have to strike a careful balance here. Cool. Next up is backend protocol selection. This is Dave has done everything for this one, I think, just about. No pressure or anything, but I think Dave, you've already almost got everything in place to bump this across the line to standard.
Meaning
Is
like
that-
I've got one, two, then we just need to merge in that docs PR. Because there's conformance errors and everything's done.
Do you remember who's implemented this already, Dave? Like, do we have all
Sorry,
three?
what's
Do you remember who's implemented this feature?
that? I think supports this, or at least it works. So it's
Yeah. Yeah,
Contour,
like I think
Contour adds it as well. So it's
okay. Yeah, so we may need one more implementation, just need a bit of work to confirm that this is I think there's at least one other one out there, but I don't know. So if anyone remembers this and volunteers that they've already implemented, that's great too. But David, it's fair. Are you able to sign up to take this one across the line formally? I think you've already done the majority of work.
It's Envoy Gateway. It works with Envoy Gateway.
Oh, cool. Yeah, that sounds likely. And then the last one that I think we haven't gotten to yet is TLS route. It sounds like Mattia and Candice are going to lead this. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've been thinking with Candice last week. And yeah, I'm down to lead it or co-lead it with Candace. I don't know if she wants to keep leading it, but yeah, I'm down for it.
Awesome. Cool.
And also, yeah, sorry.
Would you like to lead it? Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah, sure, why
Okay.
not?
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. About the implementations, we are okay. I think that we need just to complete the conformance suite. I've been chatting with Candace a little bit about what needs to be completed in relation to conformance, and then there is documentation, and yeah, I think these are the missing bits.
Cool.
And the last one is, yeah, this one you already talked about, right? Do you want to?
Yeah. So it looks like we might have in the ballpark of 5, maybe the upper end of 5 different gaps that will at least try to graduate in 1.2. I may have counted wrong there, but that helps gives us a number of slots for the next discussion, which is the number of new things we can let in to 1.2.
It should be 6. I counted 6.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Even better. Cool. Okay.
We skipped the last
Okay.
one. It has a leader already assigned to it, I think, in cluster gateway config.
Yeah. Yeah, I think Mike, no, Keith is going to take this. Yeah. And I actually, on that note, Keith or Mike or anyone, have you tracked how many implementations are supporting this already?
I think
That is a good
it was
question.
3 last time
Okay.
I checked. Okay, yeah. So in a couple meeting notes ago on May 20th, it lists Cilium, Envoy Gateway, and Istio supporting
Cool.
the infrastructure stanza.
Awesome. Okay.
Okay. Are we done with this one, Rob?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Let's go ahead. Yeah, the next one is
Actually, sorry,
Yeah, sorry.
There's a follow-up discussion. So if you go back to the agenda, the second link needs a bit of time.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, that one. So
Oh, sorry.
yeah, no worries. So this one, I really, really want to encourage people, if you want a new feature in Gateway API in 1.2, please add your comment here. And this is specifically not just that you want a feature, but that you are volunteering to lead this feature. This is kind of a dual purpose form to gather people that are interested in leading a feature in Gateway API and describing what that feature would look like. So far, I think we have, I think Dave, it looks like you added a couple more. So yeah, 5 right now. I expect that number to be a bit higher based on the various GitHub issues and other things that we've seen. So
Yeah, I think
for
I have 2 to
example,
add.
okay, great. Yeah, because there are some in that I'm expecting to see that aren't here yet. And just a reminder, if they aren't here by, end of week, that really decreases the odds of them being accepted into scope, because this is a dual purpose thing. It's 1, to make a proposal, and then 2, for even if you're not making a proposal, please vote or voice your support on the features that you are most interested in seeing and or that your implementation would be interested in supporting as soon as possible. So this is really for the community itself to be able to influence the direction and prioritization. Candice?
I just had, I made that comment about whether, I mean, who can vote? Is there one vote per implementation? Is there one vote per person? Because we are consumers of this. We don't have an implementation, so I'm not really sure my vote would count as strongly as someone who has an implementation, for example, that they're
I don't
working on.
know. I think user votes should count higher than implementer votes personally.
Yeah, I was gonna
'Cause
say you're the
y'all-
consumer. You should get an
The
extra one.
users, yeah, the users are the ones who should dictate what we are doing. The implementers don't really matter as much.
Are we actually doing? I don't think we're doing like a formal like structured vote. I think it's just like the GitHub issue like up button, which
Yeah.
is like per GitHub
It's-
user account.
Yeah, it's pretty it's unfortunately pretty easy to game right now, in the sense that those votes, as far as
So
I can
don't
tell,
do
are
that.
anonymous.
Right.
So what I would say is also going to have real value is if you leave a comment below a thing voicing your support and why you support it, as some have done. That builds some additional weight beyond just the upvote. So both are valuable, but actually a name with a rationale goes a long ways.
If you mouse over the emoji, then in GitHub you can see who put that particular emoji there. So
Emoji, yes, but the actual upvote is completely anonymous
oh,
as
you're
far as I
right.
can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Stupid rat creep. Yeah, okay, that's
Yep.
way to go, GitHub. That's awesome.
I
You
mean,
can
in
do a
future
poll.
iterations,
There are polls in GitHub discussions.
Yeah.
yeah,
People who show up to this meeting and are users of Gateway API, I think, should 100% consider themselves qualified to vote. If you're here, you're paying attention to the conversation, you've been involved in what the project is doing, and you're somebody who is going to actually be affected by any decisions we make here for the rest of your project's life, yeah, that's by all means, you should vote.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, Guillermo?
Yeah, quick question. If I remember correctly, I think it was part of Nick's young intention, and this is from the conversation around policy attachment, for splitting that gap 713 that now is memorandum into two, to perhaps be able to push one of them, the part of the direct policy class of policies, to experimental. Keep it at experimental while the inherited one would continue as provisional, so we can have more discussion. At the same time, we are now also discussing a new round of enhancements over the pattern itself, now targeting 1.3 and not 1.2. So I just would like to double check what's the consensus here, if we have one, regarding specifically direct policy attachment, if we want indeed to keep it as provisional at this stage, given the new enhancement, or in a way, if it also kind of gets dragged along with backend TLS policy, at least to experimental.
Yeah, so I think one of them is already experimental, if I remember. I think direct is experimental, but I could be wrong on that. But definitely I agree with your goal that if we push back NTLS policy, we also have to push the form of policy attachment it is. I chatted with Nick a bit yesterday about this topic, and I would classify him as the reluctant leader of policy attachment right now. Very, very open to help and assistance.
Very, very
but for
reluctant, you know.
yeah, but for now he's on board to try and get it across the line to GA in 1.2. But that was one that's a little harder to track because it's a pattern that doesn't it's something where we can have meaningful releases outside of, you know, a gateway API release because there's not an API surface to it. So it's not as clearly tied to this release scoping, though we could include it for the purpose of just creating a slot. But it's a, kind of a little different. But yes, if anyone, especially Guy, you've done a ton of work with policy. If you want to help out, if anyone else wants to help out, we really value community perspective and people who have done a lot with policy. If you can jump in and say, these are the parts that work and these don't, that would be helpful as we're trying to make a pattern formally GA.
No, absolutely. In fact, Nick reached out a couple of weeks ago when we kind of agreed that we would be working together, and I'm more than happy to lead, this new round of conversation targeting 1.3. No problem about that. I was just asking, still thinking on 1.2 and whether, one of them would make it or not. And to be clear, at least on the website, both gaps, 2648 and 2649, they both show up under provisional.
Good to know. Yeah, we should fix that because that is, yeah.
That seems wrong.
Okay. I agree with that. Okay. I'll chat with Nick. Good catch.
Yep.
Okay. I don't think we need to go through each one of the features in this call, each one of the proposed features. I know there's a lot more on the agenda, but I just want to highlight to everyone that this is here. This really, over the next week, this really is your chance to make an impact and have a real say in what makes it into scope for 1.2. The one thing that I feel pretty confident about is that there are more great ideas than there is space. So we're going to have to make some prioritization decisions here. So comments, like we're seeing there, votes, etc., really help.
What's the deadline for the scoping, Rob?
So yeah,
by the end
it's
of this
kind of
week?
hidden in here, but it's June 11, 2024.
Oh, yeah.
And at that
There it
point,
is.
we'll try and freeze these conversations. And from there, I do want to note that we're not just going to verbatim take the top N and say those are the ones, but it very likely will. There may be some variation in that if maintainers say, okay, we really absolutely need something that is broadly implementable, basically these guidelines at the end. But yeah, this is going to have a huge impact on the ones that make it into scope.
Okay. I guess we can go ahead on the next topic. Yeah, this is kind of a triaging that I wanted to do about this issue, which is about an interesting point on adding hooks on conformance test. I think it would be a nice addition to our suite. Basically, the TLDR is that the user suggests to provide a mechanism to create hooks for, post-mortem, for example, callbacks to specific functions to inspect the failed resources or whatever the implementations needs to do. And so, yeah, I went through this issue today and I think it is pretty interesting. So I wanted to gauge the interest of having such a feature in the conformance test suite.
Yeah,
does sound
I mean, I
useful.
think this, yeah, plus one. I think we've seen some interesting PRs. I am noticing that more implementations are using this framework for just E2E tests with Gateway that may be more than just conformance, for example. So adding these kinds of hooks.
One of the Linkerd
Go
developers was asking about this with respect to a gRPC route in Linkerd, actually. And my response
Yep.
was, yeah, I think you should use the conformance tests instead of writing everything from scratch on your own. Why would we not do that? So big
Yep.
plus one to things that make it easier for people, whether or not they are part of the Gateway API project, to use the conformance tests in good ways.
Yep, completely agree.
Yeah. Okay. So it's +1 on this side. Okay. The next one is from Lionel, L3, L4 routes.
Yes, hello. So first, I'm still beginner with Gateway API, and I was trying it for telco use cases, and I'm trying to understand and to find all the discussion and or tickets that happened around this topic. So around L3 and L4. I know last year you probably discussed about that. I saw it in the notes, and I'm trying to understand what would be the difference with the services, because in services we define service IPs and port. I looked into Blixt, the project that implements TCP and UDP routes, and then we have to write the port, for example, in many different places. So, for example, in listener, in the routes, parents and backends ref, in the services. And I wanted to know just what's the status around L3 and L4 routes.
Yeah, this question is part of the reason why they're both still in alpha. It's a good question that doesn't have all the answers figured out yet. The status is we're kind of stuck in alpha because we haven't had a whole lot of people that have been able to drive them forward. The Blixt implementation is an experiment, but not like a production use case. We do know of a couple of production use cases out there, but by and large, nobody's come forward to like champion TCP route forward and actually move it to beyond alpha. So they've kind of been stuck, because that is a problem. That, like, what's the difference? Why would I use this over a service is an unanswered question, or at least not fully explored question.
I can tell you why people... Sorry, go ahead, Kosti.
I heard that there are also some goals or kind of efforts to improve the service itself, to make it more, apparently it's not perfect, so they may try to make some improvements. I don't know what is the status of it, Rob may know, but one thing that it may be worth it is to evaluate if attaching policies to services, which is what Gamma does, would be kind of an alternative or something that we can do for L4 services without having the TCP route. I mean, leaving TCP service as it is, but just attaching some policies that make sense for L4, which may be more palatable and doesn't really require changes to the API, just defining which policies can be attached and where. Anyway, but I think the right solution is to have some more convergence and commonality between the working groups working on service and what we are doing, and not have two APIs that do the same thing.
Yeah, Rob.
Yeah, I would echo what's been said here. Unfortunately, this API, using it for L3, L4 is a challenge. We built a basically 3-layer API, and that is pretty sensible for L7, I would say. But it is quite challenging when you have simpler routing rules, right? Service illustrates how simple L4 routing can be, in its most basic sense. And to ask users and customers to take one resource and replace it with 3 is a challenge. There's been a lot of discussion about, hey, could we do cluster IP gateways? Could we do, more with L4, make it simpler, etc. And I definitely want to. We just have not had anyone to lead that forward. And part of that discussion is going to have to be if we can make Gateway API simple enough to work for L4. Because right now, although technically TCP route and UDP route exist and they work-ish, they add a lot of complexity for fairly minimal value. So that's, we need to improve that value proposition if we want to see those move beyond their current kind of perma-experimental state. Flynn, go ahead.
I think it probably is worth pointing out that, even back in the emissary days, we saw real use cases where the issue wasn't so much the difficulty of creating a service. The issue was that the user wanted to be able to do port multiplexing and only have one globally routable IP. So I think there are use cases out there where a TCP route does make sense. Not going to lie, I think a lot of them are being eaten by WebSockets and streaming gRPCs, which I'm perfectly okay with. But I think the use cases are still out there. And so, yeah, I mean, it probably does make sense, but I really don't want to do anything with this until we get some more feedback from the users who are trying to do this rather than the implementers only.
And that's where we are.
Okay, thanks. I tried it, and in my case, I would like also to see the IPs, for example, to be part of the route, so I can route based on the protocol, on the source and destination IPs, source destination port.
So does that is that a question of routing based on different source IP ranges, or is that a case of authorization based on IP ranges?
No, it's just routing based on these properties. Then you route towards different services, and then the services does the load balancing.
Man, I would love to see a write-up of the use case of your use case then. That would be really interesting.
I made a book to understand how Gateway API could work on this and how to use Gateway API. But it's also at the same time mixed with multi-networking, so it's a bit of mix of everything. I don't think I use Gateway API in the right way. Probably not.
Well,
maybe because I use service, for example, has a route. Like I don't have routes. The parent ref, I use an annotation in the service as a parent ref to reference in which gateway the service will be running in.
It sounds interesting. If you don't mind sharing what you have,
that would be interesting.
I know some people in this group have also been following
great.
multi-network. So yeah, very interesting. Okay. So you've got a POC. Very
I
cool.
made three different POCs, and in all of them is to try to understand how it will fit also in multi-network. So the L3 and 4, I would say it is more about the POC, the second POC, because I created this new object for it. And yeah, the first POC is what I told you, where I use the service as a route. So I specify where the service will be running, where the load balancing will be running, in which gateway. Yeah. And yeah, that's also related to multi-network, because the service itself is running in the gateway instance to not have one kube proxy. So the kube proxy is separated for this multi-network cases. But yeah, thanks for the information, and I will continue to try to find information in all the tickets, and I will try to come with more things next time. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you also for the link here. Yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Yeah, thanks.
next one-
There's definitely other intersecting things with this too, like some of the routability stuff and what gateways are exposed to what networks. Yeah, so there's a few issues this touches on. Definitely take a look. Thanks.
Yeah. Grant, backend LB policy.
Yeah, so I just wanted to follow up. We got back in LB policy into experimental. So I want to know what the next steps are. And I think I know what they are. Is really a call out for implementations to try it out. But I'm interested to hear if anybody has any suggestions on how to move forward after we've got an experimental. What sort of do you guys see as the next step here?
Can you remind me, do we already have some basic conformance tests for backend LB policy?
No, we don't have anything. So maybe that's a next step.
Yeah. I would say that's it, and then also just alongside trying to just remind implementations that this exists, and it represents one of the most requested features from users. So hopefully that translates to implementations soon. I don't know if anyone can speak to already working on implementing this, but yeah, that this would be great to see some implementations coming out soon with support for this. Conformance test would be, I think, the other place. One thing I've seen also happen, and not saying this should ever be a responsibility of an implementation owner, but for example, with the supported features thing that Lior added, I think he went out and actually added support to 1 or 2 implementations himself. I think this is far more complicated than, well, I don't know. I don't want to speak on that.
I think that was Lior going above and beyond.
Yes, that is far above and beyond. I'm not saying anyone should do that, but that is a way to force an issue sometimes. Even just creating an issue in a repository that or talking to maintainers can help.
Yeah, would you
You heard
recommend?
Rob, everyone. You got to put it whatever you want in every implementation, or it's not getting through.
No. No, but just, I would say there are a handful of implementations that have been really great at picking up and supporting new features as they roll out. And so talking to some of the maintainers of those to see if it's on their roadmap would be a good starting point. And I can help make connections if you don't know who to talk to.
I'm writing something up at the SIG level that kind of relates to this for KEPs. No more joking. I'm joking. I'm done joking.
No, you're not. You're never done joking.
No, this is a joke. No, this is serious. But at the SIG level and at the Gateway API level, and Gateway API was part of what inspired it, we have this huge problem of getting anything through the KEP process in anything short of half a decade. So one of the things that we've kind of done here, and I want to see become something institutional within SIG Network, and I'm looking for allies to help me push for this, but is a system where where a system of champions, allies, and advisors, where like KEPs, GEPs, any enhancement proposal comes to the door with like these allies built up, like come to the door with, people from other organizations, a little bit higher cost to get a proposal started, maybe significant higher cost to get a proposal started, but make it part of the process, or at least an optional part of the process to do that, so that these things can actually move quicker. Because I think a lot of what we see happen is somebody comes up with a thing that they need, they don't do that, and then things just kind of don't play out very nicely over time as people change jobs and all this other stuff. Shorter windows would be better for everyone.
Yeah. Okay. I have nothing to add, honestly. Oh, yeah. Thank you,
Yeah,
Shane,
no,
for your point of view.
Not much to add either. Just I agree with that direction, and the more advocates we can get, the better.
Yeah.
That's good.
Okay. And the last one is from you, Costin.
That's actually
think
my
this is-
summary of what Costin brought up earlier.
Okay, sorry.
If anybody thinks that my summary is wrong, now is a great time to bring that up, or just to fix it in the doc.
Yeah, thank you for writing that down. I think that matches my my recollection of how that
Summary.
conversation went, and it is really good to capture it, because I think it was a key discussion point. So thank you.
I think it is. I really do think it's something that we should keep an eye on, and something that is pretty likely to warrant more discussion in the future, right? Yeah.
Honestly, something that I wanted to add about on this topic is the whole discussion started with do we want to change this rule, for example, to have the 50% of implementations to implement an experimental feature, right? But if we have 50% or more than 50% of implementations implementing a specific features, what's the point of having experimental features? I mean, what's the point of having optional features, right? I mean, everything becomes core, kind of.
Yeah.
So
let's be
what's the
clear.
point?
If we get to a point where 50% or more of the implementations are implementing a given experimental feature, I, for one, would be arguing very strenuously that that feature is no longer experimental and it belongs in the standard channel. So certainly if you have more than 3, then I think that's a really strong signal that a given API is ready to advance, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I should clarify, it's not just that, oh, well, you have 3 implementations, you can move to standard, right, immediately. That doesn't necessarily, that's not the only requirement we're looking at. We are trying to look at the quality of the API, feedback we've gotten, the level of feedback, the level of usage. This is just a minimum bar, and one of several.
Usage is a very good one. I mean, we have this problem in Istio. We have all kind of features that are barely used by 1 or 2 people, and say we cannot remove them. That would be a good criteria for promoting something as well, because we have feature requests. It looks like it's a very important thing, but then if you look at the usage numbers, you find out it's not that important.
The most painful thing, at least with most implementations I'm aware of, is we really have to rely on user feedback, customer feedback for any understanding of usage, because for some reason people don't like us tracking them. I don't know why. And so generally I don't think any implementations do. So yeah.
It's also interesting it's also interesting to hear the comment of, oh, 1 or 2 people are using this feature, so we can't remove it from Istio. And I don't know, man, at some point you may need to remove it from Istio to be able to move forward, right? But I am not part of the Istio project, so it's easy for me to say that, even though it's painful and difficult.
Reality is you cannot remove anything that's shipped, and it's almost impossible for any implementations that wants to keep users. It's
There's a longer discussion to have there.
Yeah. So we have gone through all the topics. Is there anything else that anybody wants to add? Oh, I think we can wrap it up. Right?
Thanks for running it, Mattia.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure.
Thanks.
So thank you everybody for joining us this Gateway API meeting, and see you next time.
Thanks.
Thanks much.